Hi Theory 3, my name is Kristen Campbell and I am going to be your online theory teacher for this semester. This is lesson 1. It's going to be probably a lot of review, things you already know, but I want to make sure that we're all starting from the same point. So we're going to just jump into some easy stuff here for the first couple weeks and then maybe do some things that you haven't heard or known before. So let's talk about the 4 instruments in the string family. We have violin, viola, cello, and bass. And let's talk about the strings that each of them play. So the violin has 4 strings. Their highest is the E string. It goes E, then A, D, and G is their lowest string. The viola doesn't have an E string, but it has an A. A string is their highest string. Then D, G, and then they have a low C string. Cello is exactly the same as the viola. They have an A string as their highest string, then D, then G, and then C. Then the double bass, they're kind of backwards from the violin. So they actually have their highest string is G, the next one is D, then A, then E. So the violin string has the highest is E, double bass, the lowest is E. It's exactly reverse from violin. Double bass is the lowest sounding, so they're low E. Sometimes they can actually have what's called an extension on their double bass, and they can drop down 3 more notes for a low C, which is the very lowest C on the piano as well. So those are the strings for the open strings for each of the stringed instruments. Then on your worksheet, on the very first page, you're going to see it looks like a scroll with lots of bubbles on it, okay? What you have to do there is fill in the letter names for where they are on the fingerboard. So for violin, you'll see there's a first finger there. So when you put your first finger down, like when you were first starting, we started where we put our first finger on F sharp, or on the A string, we put our first finger on B. All the instruments put their first finger on B. Second finger, third finger. So think about where those finger positions are, or when you had tapes on your violin, it's those letters. Okay, so 1, then high 2, 3, and 4. Then when you guys got to book 2, you learned how to play, or even late book 1, you learned how to play low 2. So you'll see a bubble in between 1 and 2. That would be our low 2. You'll also see a bubble that's way back by the nut. That would be our low 1 for violin, viola, and cello. When you pull your first finger back from where your beginning tape was, that's that first bubble. Fourth finger for violin and viola. If you played high 3 or low 4, what is the name of that note? Okay? Some of them, there are actually a couple letters that you could put in there. And that leads me to my first term that I want you to know, and that is harmonic. Notes are enharmonic when they are the same pitch. When you play them on your instrument, they're the same pitch, but they have 2 different letter names, okay? Often I say it's their secret spy name. So let's say, that's a good one, C sharp. Think about where you play C sharp on your instrument. If you're thinking about your A string for violin and viola, it's second finger on the A string. For cello, your third finger. Now what's another way we could say this, that pitch? Well, it's D flat. Think about how you play D flat on your instrument. It's in the same place as C sharp. When the same pitch, the same place on your fingerboard, when it has 2 different letter names, we call that enharmonic. Okay? So There are several places on your fingerboard you might put G sharp, or another name for it is A flat. Either one is correct for the fingerboard. You can choose which one you want. Further down on that first page, I've given you a list of notes with a sharp or with a flat, and you have to put their enharmonic name next to it. So C sharp, D flat. Now, just a hint, it will always be either a letter higher or a letter lower. For it to be enharmonic, it either has to be a letter higher or a letter lower. So if B flat would be A something, or B something would be C something. Okay, I don't want to give you all the answers. So let's do one more just to make sure you understand. A flat. What's another name for A flat? Well, it's not going to be anything A, okay? So A flat, think about where that is on your instrument. Low fourth finger on the D string, right? Okay. How else could you play that? What other finger could you use? So if you use your third finger, it could be G sharp. Okay? Is this making sense? If notes can play the same place on the fingerboard with different names, it's enharmonic. Okay? Now, each instrument reads from a different clef, except for the double bass and cello. They read from the same clef. So you probably know how to draw your own clef already from the instrument that you play, but we want you to know how to draw all of the clefs, okay? So on your worksheet, you're gonna see where it's a light, just step-by-step drawing. Trace those and then learn to draw your own. Real quick, let me show you probably the most confusing one is the treble clef. So let me give you just a little bit of a step-by-step. The first step, you're going to draw a J. It needs to come through all 5 lines. Then the next one is you draw a capital letter D that comes down and touches line 4. Then you're going to draw a capital letter C that comes down and touches line 1. And then you come up and touch line 3 with a capital letter D, and then you curl around with a curly Q around the second line. Okay, you can see all of those steps on your paper. This is a treble clef. The word treble means high. It's not a treble clef. It's not in trouble, but the word treble means high. Okay, the next clef is the alto clef, which is what the violas read from. The first thing you're going to do is draw a thick line going from the top line to the bottom line. So line 5 all the way down to line 1. And just a reminder, we always count the lines starting from the bottom, the lines and spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, spaces 1, 2, 3, 4. Always start from the bottom. So alto clef, you have your thick line, then a thin line. Still make sure they don't extend beyond line 1 or line 5. Thick line, thin line, and then it's a capital letter B, but it doesn't touch the thin line, okay? Now, if you want to get really fancy, you could draw your capital B and add a little arrow kind of thing in there. So it looks like a brace, okay? But if just a capital letter B is fine as well. Mine is touching there. You want a little space between the top of the B and the line. Okay, that's the alto clef. Bass clef, which is what cellos and basses read. You draw a big dot on the 4th line, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the line, it's the line for F in the bass clef. And so sometimes it's called the F clef. And then you're gonna draw half of a heart, come up, touch the top line, but don't come all the way down and touch the bottom line. Stop in that bottom space. It's half of a heart, and then 2 dots on either side of the line where you put the big dot. Okay, so kind of makes an arrow. Big dot, half of a heart, don't touch the bottom line, top dot, top space, and then space 3. Okay, those are your 3 clefs. Dynamics. What does the word dynamic mean? In Italian, the word dynamic means volume. So we're talking about how loud or how soft we play, which you probably know. Let's talk about the loudest volume that we have, which is fortissimo. Okay? Then we have, and we use 2 Fs for that. Very loud. Then forte, just 1 F. Mezzo forte. And just a side note, the word mezzo, M-E-Z-Z-O, is Italian as well. And the 2 Z's here, we don't say this mezzo. In Italian, we say that ZZ. Okay, it's like a sizzle. Mezzo. So we have mezzo forte, medium loud. Mezzo piano, medium soft. Piano. And then 2 P's is pianissimo. Anytime you see issimo in Italian, it's going to mean very. So you have fortissimo, very loud, pianissimo, very soft. Okay, talking about rhythm. So in rhythm is the beat. It's also how we know how long or short to hold a note. Okay, so we have different note values. And you probably know all this, but let's talk about it real quick just to make sure we're all on the same page. A whole note gets 4 beats. If we divide that whole note in half, we get a half note, 2 beats, 2 beats. If we divide our half notes, we get quarter notes. How many beats does a quarter note get? Each quarter note gets 1. We divide it again, and we get 1/8 notes. And the reason they're called 1/8 notes is, guess how many 1/8 notes are in a whole note? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1/8 notes. Okay? And they each get half of a beat. Then if you divide your 1/8 notes, and I'm not going to draw these out, but we get 16th notes. And you would have 16 of them in a whole note. Okay? 16th notes get half of what the 1/8 note gets, so these get a quarter of a beat. Dotted half notes, what does a dot do to a note? A dot says, take this note, however many beats it gets, which is 2, cut that number in half. So what's half of 2? 1, and it gets 3. How many would a dotted whole note get? Whole note gets 4. Half of 4 is 2. So dotted whole note gets 6. Dotted quarter note. Quarter note gets 1. What's half of 1? Half. So dotted quarter note gets 1.5. Okay. Rests. Each of these notes has a matching rest. The whole note, it looks like a hole in the ground. So you could draw a bunny coming out of it or a flower. A half note, you've got hat, looks like a hat. Quarter note is a stretchy Z with a C on the bottom. An 1/8 note rest, it's a dot, looks like a 7. You can remember that 7, 8, they're close. So a dot that looks like a 7, that's an 1/8 note rest. And then the 16th note rest is 2 dots. So it's like a double 7 on top of each other. Those are the rests that mean rest for that amount of beats. You should, if you've been playing if you're in 333 and you've been playing this long, I think you know all of this. You may not have ever drawn these, okay? So on your worksheet on page 3, on page 3, you're going to be drawing those in and then telling me how many beats each one of those gets, okay? Now, that's if we're in 4/4 time, if the quarter note is getting 1 beat. If we are in 6/8 time, this is meaning that the 8th note gets 1 beat, okay? So we've got the 8th note getting 1 beat. So now you're going to write in, at the 8th note, you're going to write in that this gets half of a beat. How much would the quarter note get? Well, 2 8th notes together equal a quarter note. So the quarter note is now going to get, whoops, I wrote that wrong. The 8th note usually gets half of a beat. In 6/8, it will get 1. So now if there's 2 8th notes in here, how many beats does the quarter note get in 6/8 time? It gets 2. What about the dotted quarter note? In 4/4 time, let's do this. In 4/4, it gets half. It gets 1. It gets 1 1/2. So in 6/8 time, how many 8th notes are inside this dotted quarter note? Well, there's 2, and then the dot means half of 2. So we actually have 3 8th notes. So in 6/8 time, it gets 3. So if you notice, whatever it gets in 4/4 time, it doubles in 6/8 time. If it gets 1 in 4/4, what's double it? It gets 2. 1 1/2, 3. Okay? We don't use a whole note in 6/8 time. Because how many 8th notes are inside this whole note? 8. And we can only have 6 in every measure. So you won't use a whole note in 6/8 time. Let's talk about on the staff. We call these bar lines. You should know this because you've been reading music for a while. Make sure your bar line, when you draw them, they don't go over top of the staff. And then at the very end, we have a thick line and a thin line, which means it's a double bar line, which means the end, okay? Time signatures. The time signature is always found next to the clef. The top number tells us what? That there are that many beats in every measure. So there's going to be 4 beats total here and 4 beats total here. The bottom number tells us what kind of note gets 1 beat. What kind gets 1 beat? Okay, so bottom number tells us what kind of note gets 1 beat. So you're going to see that on page 4 that you're going to have to fill out those time signatures and what they mean. Then write in the counts as you would count them. Okay, now I prefer that you write in all of the 8th notes in 4/4 time. If we're dealing with 8th notes or 16th notes, I want you to write in where all of those beats are, not just 1, if it's a quarter note, 1, 2, and write 1 and 2, and so that I can see that you understand where those are. So what I mean, let me give you an illustration of that. Erase my dry erase board here. Okay, so if we are in 4/4 time, and we have 1, 2, and 3, 4, and okay, so here's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and. So don't leave these out just because you know that they're in there and there's no note. Write them so that we can see, I can see that you understand that the and is inside this 1. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This will help you not make mistakes, kind of like math and writing out your work. I need to see your thinking here when you write out your counting. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, so you have one of these lines to do in 4/4 time, one to do in 3/4 time, one in 5/4, and one in 6/8. Now remember, in 6/8, your 8th note, so if it's in 6/8, your 8th note, oops, going the wrong way, will get one beat. So you would draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The dashes show that these counts are all in one note. Okay, does that make sense? So write in the counting, and then after you fill out these worksheets and answer them to the best of your ability, upload them to Google Classroom so I can see your work. This will help me know, just to make sure, because we have not offered online theory like this before, it will help me know if we're all on the same page, if everybody understands the concepts. If you're looking at this and going, I have no idea what this is, will you let me know and we can put you in a theory class where it can be just a little bit, I can take a step back in theory 2 and we're gonna cover all this a little slower. So if that's an issue for you, if you're looking at this and like, this is way too hard, hey, it's not a problem. Let either Mr. Charles or me or your private teacher know, and we can get you switched to a different class to make sure that you understand it. I don't want this to be hard and you don't get a grade for this, so let's learn rather than just say, oh, I'm in theory 3. You know, if you don't learn anything, it's not going to mean anything. So fill out these worksheets, upload them to Google Classroom so I can see your work, and then I will see you next week. Have a great week.